Welcome to Dr. Creepin's Dungeon. We find weird things creepy because they challenge our understanding of what feels normal and familiar. The human brain is constantly searching for patterns and explanations, so when we encounter something strange, unnatural, or out of place, it creates a feeling of uncertainty. A person standing completely still in the wrong place, a familiar object behaving strangely, or something that looks almost human, but not quite, can trigger a deep sense of discomfort. Often the fear comes from not knowing what we're seeing or what it means. Yes, the feeling that something is wrong even if we can't explain why. The unknown leaves room for our imagination to create something far more frightening than reality itself, as we shall see in tonight's 3 stories. Now, as ever, before we begin, a word of caution. Tonight's tales may contain strong language as well as descriptions of violence and horrific imagery. That sounds like your kind of thing. Then let's begin.
The bodies had broken into pieces, as though they'd been made of glass. Cold Light by Captain S. P. Meek. God damn it, Carnes. I'm on my vacation. I know it, Doctor, and I hate to disturb you, but I felt that I simply had to. I have one of the weirdest cases on my hands that I've ever been mixed up in. And, well, I think you'll forgive me for calling when I tell you about it. Dr. Bird groaned into the telephone. I took a vacation last summer. Tried to. You hauled me away from the best fishing I've found in years to help you on a case. This year I've traveled all the way from Washington to San Francisco to get away from you, and the very day that I get here, you're after me. Oh, I won't have anything to do with it. Where are you, anyway? I'm at Fallon, Nevada, Doctor. I'm sorry that you won't help me out because the case promises to be unusually interesting. Hey, let me tell you about it at least. Dr. Bird groaned louder than ever into the telephone. All right, go ahead and tell me about it, if it'll relieve your mind. But I've given you my final answer. I am not a bit interested in it. That's quite all right, Doctor. Don't expect you to touch it. I hope, however, that you'll be able to give me an idea of where to start. So, did you ever see a man's body broken in pieces? You mean badly smashed up? No, indeed I mean just what I said. Broken in pieces. Legs snapped off as though the entire flesh had become brittle. No, I haven't. Neither did anyone else. Well, I've seen it, Doctor. What have you been drinking? Operative Carnes of the United States Secret Service chuckled softly to himself. The voice of the famous scientist of the Bureau of Standards plainly showed an interest which was quite at variance with the words he'd spoken. Oh, I was quite sober, Doctor. So was Hughes. We both saw it. Who is Hughes? Well, he's an airmail pilot. One of the crack flyers of the Transcontinental Airmail Corporation. Hey, why don't I tell you the whole thing in order? All right. I do have a few minutes to spare, but I'll warn you again that I don't intend to touch this case. Suit yourself, Doctor. Well, I have no authority to requisition your services. As you know, the TAC has been handling a great deal of transcontinental airmail with a pretty clean record on accidents. Day before yesterday, a special plane left Washington to carry 2 packages from there to San Francisco. One of them was a shipment of jewels valued at $250,000, consigned to a San Francisco firm, and the other was a sealed packet from the War Department. No one was supposed to know the contents of that packet except the Chief of Staff, who delivered it to the plane personally. But rumors got out, as usual, and it was popularly supposed to contain certain essential features of the Army's war plans. Well, this much is certain. The plane carried not only the regular TAC pilot and courier, but also an Army courier, and it was guarded during the trip by an Army plane armed with small bombs and a machine gun. And you know what? I rode in it. My orders were simply to guard the ship until it landed at Mills Field, then to guard the courier from there to the Presidio of San Francisco until his packet was delivered personally into the hands of the commanding general of the Ninth Corps area. Well, the trip was quiet and monotonous until after we left Salt Lake City at dawn this morning. Nothing happened until we were about 100 miles east of Reno. We'd taken elevation to cross the Stillwater Mountains and were skimming low over them, my plane trailing the TAC plane by about a half a mile. I wasn't paying any particular attention to the other ship when I suddenly felt our plane leap ahead. Well, it was a fast one, and the pilot gave it the gun and made it move, I can tell you. I yelled into my phone, asked him what the reason was. Pilot yelled back that the plane ahead was in trouble. Now, as soon as it was called to my attention, I could see myself that it wasn't acting normally. It was losing elevation and was pursuing a very erratic course. Before we could reach it, it lost flying speed and fell into a spinning nosedive and headed for the ground. Well, I watched, expecting every minute to see the crew make parachute jumps, but they didn't, and the plane hit the ground with a terrific crash. It caught fire, I suppose. No, Doctor. That's one of the funny things about the accident. It didn't. It hit the ground in an open place free from brush and literally just burst into pieces. But it didn't flame up. We headed directly for the scene of the crash, and we encountered another funny thing. We almost froze to death. What do you mean? Well, exactly what I say. Well, of course, it's pretty cold at that altitude all the time, but this cold was like nothing I'd ever encountered. It seemed to freeze the blood in our veins, and it congealed frost on the windshields, and it made the motor miss for a moment. It was only momentary, and it only existed directly over the wrecked plane. We went past it and swung around in a circle and came back over the wreck. But we didn't feel that cold again. Next thing we tried to do was find a landing place. And that country is pretty rugged and rough, and there wasn't a flat place for miles that was large enough to land a ship on. Hughes and I talked it over. There didn't seem to be much of anything that we could do except to go on until we found a landing place. I had no experience in parachute jumping, and I couldn't pilot the plane if Hughes jumped. So we swooped down over the wreck as close as we dared, and that was when we saw the condition of the bodies. God, the whole plane was cracked up pretty badly, but the weird part of it was the fact that the bodies of the crew had broken into pieces, as though they'd been made of glass. Arms and legs were detached from the torsos and lying at a distance. There was no sign of blood on the ground. We saw all this with our naked eyes from close at hand, and verified it by observations through binoculars from a greater height. And when we'd made our observations and marked the location of the wreck as closely as we could, we headed east until we found a landing place near Fallon. Hughes dropped me here and went on to Reno, or to San Francisco if necessary, to report the accident and get more planes to aid in the search. Well, I had no idea as to what to do, but, well, it seemed to be in your line, and as I knew you were at St. Francis, I called you up. Tell me, what are your plans now? Well, I made none until I talked to you. The country where the wreck occurred is unbelievably wild, and we can't get near it with any transportation other than burros. The only thing that I can see to do is to gather together what transportation I can and head for the wreck on foot to rescue the packets and to bring out the bodies. So, can you suggest anything better? Tell me, when do you expect to start? Well, as soon as I can get my pack train together. Possibly in 3 to 4 hours. Lawrence, tell me, are you sure that those bodies were broken into pieces? An arm or a leg might easily be torn off in a complete crash. No, they were smashed into bits as nearly as I could tell, Doc. Hughes is an old-time flyer, and he's seen plenty of crashes, but he's never saw anything like this. It beats anything that I ever saw, too. If your observations were accurate, there could be only one cause, and that one is a patent impossibility. I haven't got any equipment with me, but I expect that I can get most of the stuff that I want from the University of California across the bay at Berkeley. I can get a plane at Criseyfield, Here, I'll tell you what to do, Carnes. Get your burro train together. Start as soon as you can. But leave me a half-dozen burros and a guide at Fallon. I'll get up there as soon as I can, and I'll try to overtake you before you get to the wreck. And if I don't, please don't disturb anything any more that you can help until my arrival. Do you understand? I thought you were on your vacation, Doctor. Ah, shut up, will you? Like most of my vacations, this one will have to be postponed. I'll move as swiftly as I can. I ought to be at Fallon tonight if I'm lucky, and don't run into any obstacles. Burros are fairly slow, but I'll make the best time possible. Well, I rather expected you would, Doctor. Look, I can't pack my train together until this evening, so I'll wait for you right here. And I'm really glad that you're going to get in on it. Part 2. Silently, Carnes and Dr. Bird surveyed the wreck of the TAC plane. The observations of the Secret Service operative had been correct. The bodies of the unfortunate crew had been broken into fragments. Their limbs had not been twisted off as a freak of the fall, but had been cleanly broken off, as though the bodies had suddenly become brittle and shattered on their impact with the ground. Not only the bodies, but the ship itself had been broken up. Even the clothing of the men was in pieces, or had long splits in the fabric, whose edges were as clean as though they'd been cut with a knife. Dr. Bird picked up an arm which had belonged to the pilot and examined it. Oh, the brittleness, if it had ever existed, was gone now, and the arm was limp. No rigor mortis, commented the doctor. How long ago was the wreck? About 72 hours ago. What about those packets that were on the plane? Carnes stepped forward and gingerly inspected first the body of the army courier, and then that of the courier of the TAC. Both gone, Doctor, he reported, straightening up. Dr. Bird's face fell into grim lines. There's more to this case than appears on the surface, Carnes, he said. This was no ordinary wreck. I'll bring up that third burro. I want to examine these fragments a little. He then went on to one of the two guides who had accompanied them from Fallon. You and Wallace scout around the ground and see what you can find out. I especially wish to know whether anyone had visited the scene of the wreck. The guides consulted a moment and then started on their way. Carnes drove up the burro the doctor had indicated, and Dr. Bird unpacked it. He opened a mahogany case and took from it a high-powered microscope. Setting the instrument up on a convenient rock, he subjected portions of the wreck, including several fragments of flesh, to careful scrutiny. When he completed his observations, he fell into a brown study, from which he was aroused by Carnes. What did you find out about the cause of the wreck, Doctor? I don't know what to think. The immediate cause was that everything was frozen. The plane ran into a belt of cold which froze up the motor, which probably killed the crew instantly. It was undoubtedly the aftermath of that cold which you felt when you swooped down over the wreck. Yeah, but it seems impossible that it could have gotten cold enough to freeze everything up like that. Yeah, it does. Yet I'm confident that that's what happened. It was no ordinary cold, Carnes. It was cold of the type that infests interstellar space. Cold beyond any conception you have of cold. Cold near the range of the absolute zero of temperature. Nearly 450 degrees below zero on the Fahrenheit scale. At such temperatures, things which are ordinarily quite flexible and elastic, such as rubber or flesh, become as brittle as glass and would break in the manner which these bodies have broken. An examination of the tissues of the flesh shows that it has been submitted to some temperatures very low in the scale, probably below that of liquid air. Such a temperature would produce instant death and the other phenomena which we can observe here. Yeah, but what could cause such a low temperature, Doctor? Well, that I don't know yet, although I do hope to find out before we're finished. Cold is a funny thing, Carnes. Ordinarily, it's considered as simply the absence of heat, yet I've always held it to be a definite negative quantity. All through nature we observe that every force has its opposite or negative force to oppose it. We have positive and negative electrical charges, positive and negative or north and south magnetic poles. We have gravity and its opposite apergy, and I believe cold is really negative heat. Well, I never heard of anything like that, Doctor. I always thought that things were cold because heat was taken from them, not because cold was added. It sounds preposterous. Such is the common idea, and yet I cannot accept it, for it does not explain all the recorded phenomena. You are familiar with the searchlight, are you not? Well, in a general way, yeah. Well, a searchlight is merely a source of light and, of course, of heat, which is placed at the focus of a parabolic reflector so that all of the rays emanating from the source travel in parallel lines. A searchlight, of course, gives off heat. If we place a lens of the same size as the searchlight aperture in the path of the beam and concentrate all the light and heat at one spot, the focal point of the lens, the temperature of that point is the same as the temperature of the source of the light, less what has been lost by radiation. You understand that, do you not? Why, certainly. Now, suppose that we place at the center of the aperture of the searchlight a small opaque disc, which is permeable neither to heat nor light, in such a manner as to interrupt the central portion of the beam. As a result, the beam will go out in the form of a hollow rod or pipe of heat and light with a dark, cold core. This core will have the temperature of the surrounding air plus the small amount which was radiated into it from the surrounding pipe. If we now pass this beam of light through a lens in order to concentrate the beam, both the pipe of heat and the cold core will focus. If we place a temperature measuring device near the focus of the dark core, we'll find that the temperature is lower than the surrounding air. And this means that we have focused, or rather concentrated, the cold. It sounds impossible, but, well, I can offer no other criticism. Nevertheless, it is experimentally true. It's one of the facts which lead me to consider cold as negative heat. However, this is true of cold, as it is of the other negative forces. They exist and manifest themselves only in the presence of the positive forces. No one has yet concentrated cold except in the presence of heat, as I have outlined to you. How this cold belt which the TAC plane encountered came to be there is another question indeed. The thing which we have to determine is whether it was caused by natural or artificial forces. Both of the packets which the plane carried are gone, Doctor, observed Carnes. Yeah, that seems to add weight to the possibility that the cause was artificial, but it's far from conclusive. The packets might not have been on the men when the plane fell, or someone may have passed later and taken them for safekeeping. The doctor's remarks here were interrupted by the guides. Someone's been out here since the wreck, Doctor, said Bill. Warder and I found tracks where two men came up here and prowled around for some time, and left by the way they came. They went off toward the northwest. We followed their trail for about 40 rods, then we lost it. We weren't able to pick it up again. Well, thanks, Bill, replied the doctor. Well, Carnes, that seems to add more weight to the theory that the spot of cold was made, and it didn't just happen naturally. If a prospecting party had just happened along, they would either have left the wreck alone, or they would have made some attempt to intern the bodies. That cold belt must have been produced artificially by men who planned to rob this plane after bringing it down, and who were nearby to get their plunder. So, is there any chance of following that trail? I doubt it, Doc. No, Waller and I scouted around quite a lot. We couldn't pick it up again. Is there any power line passing within 20 miles of here? Oh, none that Waller and I know of, Doc. Funny. Such a device as must have been used would need power, and lots of it for operation. Well, I'll try my luck. Carnes, help me unpack and set up the rest of my apparatus. With the aid of the operative, Dr. Bird unpacked 2 of the bureaus and extracted from cases, where they were carefully packed and padded, some elaborate electrical and optical apparatus. The first was a short telescope of large diameter, which he mounted on a base in such a manner that it could be elevated or depressed and rotated in any direction. At the focal point of the telescope was fastened a small knot of wire, from which one lead ran into the main piece of the apparatus, which he'd sat on a flat rock. The other lead from the wire knot ran into a sealed container surrounded by a water bath, under which a spirit lamp burned. From the container, another lead led to the main apparatus. This main piece consisted of a series of wire coils mounted on a frame and attached to the two leads. The doctor took from a padded case a tiny magnet suspended on a piece of wire of exceedingly small diameter, which he fastened in place inside the coils. Cemented to the magnet was a tiny mirror. "Hey, what is that apparatus?" asked Carnes as the doctor finished his setup and surveyed it with satisfaction. "Merely a thermocouple attached to a Darson-Val galvanometer," replied the doctor. "This large squat telescope catches and concentrates on the thermocouple, and the galvanometer registers the temperature." "Phew, you're way out of my depth here. What's a thermocouple?" "A juncture of two wires made of dissimilar metals, in this case of platinum and of platinum-iridium alloy. There's another similar junction in this case, which is kept at a constant temperature by the water bath. When the temperatures of the two junctions are the same, the system is in equilibrium. When there are different temperatures, an electrical potential is set up, which causes a current to flow from one to the other through the galvanometer. The galvanometer consists of a magnet set up inside coils through which the current I spoke of flows. This current causes the magnet to rotate, and by watching the mirror, the rotation can be detected and measured. Now, this device is one of the most sensitive ever made, and is used to measure the radiation from distant stars. Currents as small as you can imagine have been detected and measured. This particular instrument is not that sensitive to begin with, and has its sensitivity further reduced by having a high resistance in one of the leads. So, what are you going to use it for?" "I'm hoping to try and locate somewhere in these hills a patch of local cold. It may not work, but I have hopes. If you'll manipulate the telescope so as to search the hills around here, I'll watch the galvanometer." Part 3. For several minutes, Carnes swung the telescope around. Twice Dr. Bird stopped him and decreased the sensitiveness of his instrument by introducing more resistance in the lines in order to keep the magnet from twisting clear around, due to the fluctuations in the heats received on account of the varying conditions of reflection. As Carnes swung the telescope again, the magnet swung around sharply, nearly to a right angle to its former position. "Stop!" cried the doctor. "Now, read your device." Carnes read the compass bearing on the protractor attached to the frame which supported the telescope. Dr. Bird took a pair of binoculars and looked long and earnestly in the indicated direction. With a sigh, he laid down the glasses. "Now, I can't see a thing, Carnesy," he said. "We'll have to move over to the next crest and make a new setup. Plant it right on the hill so we can get a compass bearing and get the airline distance with a rangefinder." On the hilltop which Dr. Bird had pointed out, the apparatus was again set up. For several minutes Carnes swept the hills before an exclamation from the doctor told him to pause. He checked the new reading, and the doctor laid off the two readings on a sheet of paper with a protractor and made a few calculations. "I don't know," he said reflectively when he'd finished his computations. "This damn instrument is still so sensitive that you may have merely focused on a deep shadow or a cold spring or something of that sort. But the magnet kicked clear around, and it may mean that we've located what we were looking for. It should be about 2 miles away, almost due west of here." "Well, there's no spring that I know of, Doc, and I think I know every waterhole in this country," remarked Bill. "It could hardly be a spring at this elevation anyway," replied the doctor. "Maybe it is what we're seeking. We'll start out in that direction anyway. Bill, you'd better take the lead, for you know the country. Spread out a little so we won't be too bunched if anything happens." For 3/4 of an hour, the little group of men made their way through the wilderness in the direction indicated by the doctor. Presently, Bill, who was in the lead, held up his hand with a warning gesture. The other 3 closed up as rapidly as cautious progress would allow. "What is it, Bill?" asked the doctor in an undertone. "Well, slip up ahead and look over that crest." The doctor obeyed the instructions. As he glanced over, he gave vent to a low whistle of surprise, a motion for Carnes to join him. The operative crawled up and glanced over the crest. In a hollow before them was a crude one-storied house, and directed on an open space before it was a massive piece of apparatus. It consisted of a large number of huge metallic cylinders, from which lines ran to a silvery concave mirror mounted on an elaborate frame which would allow it to be rotated so as to point in any direction. "What is it?" whispered Carnes. "It's some kind of a projector," muttered the doctor. "Never seen one quite like it, but it's meant to project something. Can't make out the curve of that mirror. It isn't a parabola, and it isn't an ellipse. Must be a high-degree subcatenary, or else building a transcendental function." He then raised himself to get a clearer view, and as he did so, a puff of smoke came from the house, to be followed in a moment by a sharp crack as a bullet flattened itself a few inches from his head. The doctor tumbled back over the crest out of sight of the house. Bill and Walter hurried forward, their rifles held ready for action. "Right, get out on the flanks, men," directed the doctor. "The man we want is in a house on that hollow. He's armed, and he means business." Bill and Walter crawled under the shelter of the rocks to a short distance away, and then, rifles ready, advanced to the attack. A report came from the hollow, and a bullet whined over Bill's head. Then almost instantly a crack came from Walter's rifle, and splinters flew from the building in the hollow a few inches from a loophole, through which projected the barrel of a rifle. The rifle barrel swung rapidly in a circle, and barked in Walter's direction. But as it did so, Bill's gun spoke, and again splinters flew from the building. "Good work," said Dr. Bird, as he watched the slow advance of the 2 guides. If we just had rifles, we could join in the party, but we're a little too far away for effective pistol work. Right, let's go ahead. We may get close enough to do a little shooting ourselves." Pistols in hand, Carnes and the doctor crawled over the crest and joined in the advance. Again and again the rifle spoke from the hollow, and was answered by the vicious barks of the rifles in the hands of the guides, Carnes and the doctor resting their pistols on rocks, and sending an occasional bullet toward the loophole. The conditions of light and the moving target were not conducive to making good marksmanship on the part of the besieged man, and none of the attackers were hit. Quickly, Walter succeeded in sending a bullet through the loophole. The rifle barrel suddenly disappeared. With a shout, the 4 men rose from their cover and advanced toward the building at a run. As they did so, an ominous whirring sound came from the apparatus in front of the house, and a sudden chill filled the air. "Back!" shouted Dr. Bird. "Back below the hill if you value your lives." He then turned and raced at full speed toward the sheltering crest of the hill, the others following him closely. The whirring sound continued, and the concave reflector turned with a grating sound on its gears. As the path of its rays struck the ground, the rocks became white with frost, and one rock split with a sharp report, one fragment rolling down the slope, carrying others in its trail. With panic-stricken faces, the 4 men raced toward the sheltering crest, but remorselessly the reflector swung around in their direction. The intense cold numbed the racing men, cutting off their breath and impeding their efforts for speed. "Stop!" cried the doctor suddenly. "Right, fire at that reflector. It's our only chance." He then set the example by turning and emptying his pistol futilely at the turning mirror. Bill, Walter, and Carnes all followed his example. But nearer and nearer to them came the deadly ray. Bill was the nearest to its path, and he suddenly stiffened and fell forward, his useless gun still grasped in his hands. As his body struck the ground, it rolled down the hill for a few feet, the deadly ray following it. Then his head struck a rock, and Carnes gave out a cry of horror as it smashed into fragments. Walter threw his rifle to his shoulder and fired again and again at the rotating disc. The cold had become intense, and he couldn't control the actions of his muscles, and his rifle wavered about everywhere. He then threw himself flat on the ground and, with an almost superhuman effort, steadied himself for a moment and fired. His aim was true, and with a terrific crash the reflector split into 1,000 fragments, and Dr. Bird staggered to his feet. "Right, he's out of order for a short while," he cried. "Quick, to the house while we can." As swiftly as his numb feet would allow him, he stumbled toward the house. The muzzle of his rifle again projected from the loophole, and with its crack the doctor staggered for a moment, and then fell. Walter's rifle spoke again, and the rifle disappeared through the loophole with a spasmodic jerk. Carnes stumbled his way over to the doctor. "Hey, you hit badly?" he gasped through chattering teeth. "I'm not hit at all," muttered the doctor. "I stumbled and fell just as he fired. Hey, look out, he's going to shoot again." The rifle barrel came slowly into view through the loophole. Walter fired, but his bullet missed. Carnes then threw himself behind a rock for protection. The rifle had swung in Walter's direction now, and paused. As it did so, from the house came a strangled cry and a sound of a blow. The rifle barrel disappeared, and the sounds of a struggle came from the building. "Come on now," cried Carnes as he rose to his feet, and made his way stumbling forward, the others following at the best speed which their numbed limbs would allow. As they reached the door, they became aware of a struggle which was going on inside. With all the strength he could muster, the doctor threw his massive frame against the door. It creaked, but the solid oak from which it was composed was proof against the attack, and he drew back for another onslaught. From inside the house came a pistol shot, followed by a despairing cry and a guttural roar. Joined now by Carnes, the doctor threw his weight against the door again. With a rending crash it gave in, and they fell sprawling into the cabin. The doctor was the first one to his feet. Part 4. "Who are you?" asked a voice from one corner. The doctor whirled around like a flash and covered the speaker with his pistol. "You, hands up," he said tersely. "I'm unarmed," the voice replied. "Who are you?" "We're from the United States Secret Service," replied Carnes, who had now gained his feet. "Game is up for you, and you'd better realize that quick." "Oh, Secret Service. Oh, thank God," cried the voice. "You get Koskov. He has the plans. He's gone out through that tunnel." "Where is it?" demanded Carnes. "The entrance is that iron plate on the floor." Carnes and the doctor jumped at the plate and tried to lift it, without any result. There was no handle or projection on which they could take hold. "Oh, not that way," cried the voice. "That cover is fastened on the inside. No, go outside the building. He'll come out about 200 yards north. You gotta shoot him as soon as he appears or he'll get away." Well, the three men nearly tumbled over each other to get through the doorway into the bitter cold outside. As they emerged from the cabin, the gaze of the guide swept the surrounding hills. "Hey, there he goes." "Come on, let's get him," said Carnes sharply. Walter ran forward a few feet and dropped prone to the ground, cuddling the stock of his rifle to his cheek. 200 yards away, a figure was scurrying over the rocks away from the cabin. Walter drew in his breath, and his hand grew suddenly steady as his keen grey eyes peered through the sights. Carnes and the doctor held their breath in sympathy. Suddenly, There was a rifle shot, and the fleeing man threw up his arms and fell forward on his face. "Got him," said Walter laconically. "Right. Go and bring in the body, Carnes," exclaimed the doctor. "I'll take care of that chap inside." "Oh, did you get him?" asked the voice eagerly as the doctor stepped inside. "Well, he's dead all right," replied the doctor grimly. "Hell, who the hell are you and what are you doing here?" "Look, there's a light switch on the left of the door as you come in," was his reply. Dr. Bird found the switch and snapped on the light. He turned toward the corner from whence the voice had come, and then recoiled in horror. Propped in the corner was the body of a middle-aged man, daubed and splashed with blood which ran from a wound in the side of his head. "God damn," he said. "Here, let me help you." "There's not much use," replied the man rather faintly. "I'm done in. This face wound doesn't amount to much, but I'm shot through the body and I'm bleeding internally. If you try to move me, it'll easily kill me. Just leave me alone until your partners come back." The doctor drew a flask of brandy from his pocket and then advanced towards the corner. "Here, take a few drops of this," he advised. With an effort, the man lifted the flask to his lips and gulped down a little of the fiery spirit. A sound of trampling feet came from the outside, and then a thud as though a body had been dropped. Carnes and Walter then entered the cabin. "He's as dead as a mackerel," said Carnes in answer to the doctor's look. "Water got him through the neck and broke his spinal cord. He never knew what hit him." "And the plants?" came in a gasping voice from the man in the corner. "We got them too," replied Carnes. "He had both of those packets inside his coat. They've been opened, but guess they're all here. Hey, who the hell are you?" "Well, since Kossoff is dead and I'm dying, there's no reason why I shouldn't tell you," was the answer. "I'll leave that brandy handy to keep up my strength. I only have a short time. I can't repeat this. Now, as to who I am or what I was, doesn't really matter. Kossoff knew me as John Smith, and that'll pass as well as any other name. Let my past stay buried. I am, or was, a scientist of some ability, but fortune frowned on me, and I was driven out of the world. Money would rehabilitate me. Money will do anything nowadays, so I set out to get it. And in the course of my experimental work, I discovered that cold was a negative heat and reacted to the laws which governed heat." "Well, I knew that," cried Dr. Bird, "but I could never prove it." "And, who are you?" demanded John Smith. "Dr. Bird, Bureau of Standards." "Ah, Bird, yeah, I've heard of you. You can understand me when I say that as heat, positive heat is a concomitant of ordinary light. I found that cold, negative heat is a concomitant of cold light. Hey, is my apparatus in good shape outside?" "The reflector is smashed." "I'm sorry. You would have enjoyed studying it. I presume that you saw that it's a catenary curve." "Yeah, I rather thought so." "It was, and it was also adjustable. I could vary the focal point from a few feet to several miles. With that apparatus, I could throw a beam of negative heat with a focal point which I could adjust at will. Close to the apparatus, I could obtain a temperature almost down to absolute zero. But at the longer ranges, it wasn't so cold due to leakage into the atmosphere. Well, even at 2 miles, I could produce a local temperature of 300 degrees below zero." "Tell me, what was the source of your cold?" "Liquid helium. Those cylinders contain, or rather they did contain, for I expect that Kossoff had to empty them. I used to have helium in a liquid state." "Hey, where's your compressor?" "I didn't have to use one. I developed a cold light under whose rays helium would liquefy and remain in a state of equilibrium until exposed to light rays. Those cylinders had merely enough pressure to force the liquid out to where the sun could hit it. Then they turned to gas, dropping the temperature at the first focal point of the reflection to absolute zero. When I had this much done, Koskov and I packed the whole apparatus here, and we were ready for work. We were on the path of the transcontinental airmail. I bided my time until an especially valuable shipment was to be made. My plans, which worked perfectly, were to freeze the plane in midair and then rob the wreck. I heard of a jewel shipment the TAC was to carry, and I planned to get it. When the plane came over, Koskov and I brought it down. The unsuspected presence of another plane upset us a little. I started to bring that one down, too. But we'd been all over this country, and I knew there was no place that a plane could land, so I let it go on in safety. Well, thank you for that, replied Carnes with a grimace. We robbed the wreck, and we found 2 packets. One, the jewels I was after, the other a sealed packet, which proved to contain certain War Department plans. That was when I learned who Koskov really was. I'd hired him in San Francisco as a good mechanic who had no principles. He was to get 1/4 of the loot. When we found these plans, though, he told me who he really was. He was a Russian secret agent, and he wanted to deliver the plans to Russia. Well, I may be a thief and a murderer, but I'm not yet ready to betray my country, so I told him so. He offered me almost any price for those plans, but I wouldn't listen. We had a serious disagreement. Well, he overpowered me and bound me. We had a radio set here. He called San Francisco and sent some coded message. Think he was waiting here for someone to come. If we'd followed our original plans, we'd have been miles from here before you even arrived. He had me bound and helpless, as he thought, but I worked my bonds loose a little. I made sure not to let him know it, because I knew that the plane I had let get away would guide a party here. I thought I might be able to help out. When he came and attacked the house, I worked at my bonds until they were loose enough to throw off. I saw Koskov stop my cold apparatus to working, and then he quit because he ran out of helium. When he started shooting again, I worked my way out of my bonds, and I tackled him to the ground. He was a better man than I gave him credit for, or else he suspected me. For just about the time I grabbed him, he whirled around and struck me over the head with his gun barrel, and he tore my face open. The blow stunned me. When I came to, I was thrown into this corner. I was going to have another try at it, but I guess you rushed him too fast. He turned and ran for the tunnel, but as he did so, he shot me through my body. Guess I didn't look dead enough to suit him. You gentlemen broke open the door and came in. And that's about it. Oh, no, it isn't, not by a long shot, exclaimed Dr. Bird. Where is that cold light apparatus of yours? It's in the tunnel. How'd you get into it? If you open that cupboard on the wall, you'll find an open knife switch on it. Just close it. Dr. Bird found the switch and did so. And as he did, the cabin rocked on its foundations, and both Carnes and Walter were thrown to the ground. The thud of a detonation deep in the earth came to their ears. Hey, what was that? Cried the doctor. That, replied Smith with a smile, was the detonation of 200 pounds of TNT. When you dig down into the underground cave where we use the cold light apparatus, you'll find it in fragments. That was my only child, and I'll sure as hell take it with me. As he finished, his head slumped forward on his chest. With an exclamation of dismay, Dr. Bird sprang forward and tried to lift his prostrate form. Then, in annoyance, the doctor tightened his grip on the dying man's shoulder, but Smith had collapsed into a heap. Dr. Bird bent forward and tore open his shirt and listened to his chest. He then straightened up. He is gone, he said sadly. I guess the results of his genius have died with him. He doesn't strike me as a man who left too much to chance. Carnes, is that your case completed? Yeah, very satisfactorily, Doctor. I've both of the lost packets. All right, then. Come back to the wreck and help me with my burros. I can make my way back to Fallon without a guide. Where are you going, Doctor? That, Carnes, my dear friend, is none of your goddamn business. Permit me to remind you that I am on my vacation. I haven't decided yet just where I'm going, but I can tell you one thing. It's going to be somewhere where you can't call me on the phone. My father was a police detective in Texas. One of his cases still has him question what kind of evil humans are really capable of. By Crest O Razors. I'm originally from Ireland, as was my father and his ancestors. Originally, they were among the wealthiest people in the country, until the damn blight hit. After its rampage, my ancestors slowly moved from poverty into what I'd say is upper middle class to the lower part of the upper class. Not really rich, but enough to indulge in expensive things like boats and art. Tired of the constant harassment from the English folk in his hometown, and in Britain itself where he frequently visited to do business, he moved to the United States in 1948. He originally served in the Second Great War and was a hero amongst his comrades, saving their lives from the likes of Nazis and Japanese forces. After serving there, he settled in Massachusetts, where he got a job at a police station about a half-mile from Worcester, which only accepted him because he was a smartass and could easily tell if someone was lying. There he worked on several cases, even on the infamous Whitey Bulger case. However, he got bored and soon moved down south to a relatively decent-sized town about an hour from Dallas. There he was one of, if not the best on the force. He would always wear a dark suit jacket, light brown leather pants, and dark shoes to fit with a blue tie. His green eyes, dark brown hair, tall and slightly muscular build were enough to make you question if you should even spit at him, but, well, I'm getting off track. So, one night when he was finishing his paperwork, he received a letter from a man named Emil Powers. Emil told him in the letter that his daughter was missing, and attached was a sketch of the abductor, or what looked like him. Till morning, he thought to himself. When his boss, Mr. E, arrived at the office, he immediately told him about the letter. Despite not having a good relationship with Mr. E, my father could tolerate him. Now, E was a notorious supporter of segregation and discrimination, which my father hated with all his heart and soul, since he'd experienced it firsthand in England and even in Texas. Well, son, this ain't nothing like I ever seen since I was a small fella. Why don't you put it aside and focus on another case? One regarding, well, not them folk, he said. Oh, I prefer this case, my father answered. Mr. E knew there was no change in my father's mind. He was a lot taller and not willing to take any of his shit, but still, he stood firm. You fuckers are always so firm like stone. That's why I like you, and why you got the job. You ain't willing to back down, even if the odds are against you 99 to 1. Hell, if I said no, you'd have sued my ass. I'm not willing to take that chance to an Irish drunk bastard. Mr. E shrugged. My father could take it. He'd been called worse. Instead of saying anything back, he just stared blankly at him. I shall do as you wish. I'll work on that case when you're complete with your other. Hell, get the hell out of my office before I cut your paycheck, Mr. E shouted. My father, from now on we'll call him Liam, our family's most common name, left the office and sat at his desk. He began his work on a disappearance of a 14-year-old girl who'd vanished seemingly without so much as a trace just days prior to him joining the police. Attached was a sketch of the person who was supposedly responsible for the disappearance. Little did he know that what he was dealing with was the work of a madman, or, as others say, a serial killer. Liam worked day in and day out, up at 4 a.m. and leaving at 11 p.m., never wishing to be late and always giving us good-night hugs while we slept like logs outside a cabin, waiting to be chopped and hauled into the burning flames that keep humanity warm. His reasoning was that crime never sleeps, so neither should he. I wanted to let him sleep so I could take care of his work, but he told me to follow my own dreams. I knew I couldn't convince my old man, so I let him be. One day he came across a link between his previous case, the one involving the 14-year-old girl's disappearance, and Emil's letter. He noticed that both of the victims described in the cases were last seen near telephone poles, and that the sketches of the supposed abductors were eerily similar. Both had the same nose, same hairstyle, shoulder length, had a green 1963 Chevrolet pickup truck, and eerily similar license plates, with the last number being either a 5, 6, or 9. Maybe it was just another coincidence, like he'd received several times, but, well, this was all too similar. He drove out to Emil's address and knocked on the door. A skinny, slightly shorter than my father, African-American man came out and asked Liam what he wanted. "Is, Mr. Emil Powers home? I'd like to speak with him," he asked. "Why the hell did he go with someone like you? You're white folk. White and black folk ain't supposed to be among nothing," the man responded. "Well, I, didn't know that. I'm not from around here, sorry," Liam answered. "Well, then where are you from, boy?" he asked. "Ireland. Moved here to escape harassment, but seems it's here too," Liam said. "You ain't seen nothing yet. Worst yet to come. Excuse me if I burst your bubble. Hey, Emil, get your ass downstairs this goddamn minute. Some person here wants to speak," the man shouted. "Come in, Darius," a voice likely Emil's said. Suddenly a man roughly Darius's height came rushing down the steps. He carried his suit jacket in one arm and papers in the other. "Oh, sorry. Had to get some paperwork done for my daughter's funeral. You must be with the police squad," Emil asked. "I am. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm here to discuss the letter you wrote." "Where was she last seen, as in her location?" Liam asked. "Berkeley's, near the post office. Told her to get me some chips for a barbecue we was going to have. Waited for about an hour, since there's a lot of flavors there. Don't take her an hour to choose, so thought she was saying hi to her friends or at their house without my knowledge. So when I called, they told me she wasn't there. Said someone who claimed to be a relative got her, but then went the opposite of this place," Emil answered. Liam asked several more questions, but I could never remember them. He thanked Emil and left. He headed to his office and sat down with the new information he'd received. He placed both cases on his desk, side by side. Liam looked at the cases, papers upon papers of the case files, descriptions, backgrounds, and other unimportant things that didn't matter to him. He worked until he fell asleep at his desk. At around 8 a.m., he was woken up by his boss. "How the fuck are you doing sleeping on the job?" he shouted. "Sorry, sir. Lost track of time from working too late," he replied. "Well, you tell that to me when I lose track of your goddamn paychecks," Mr. E spat. Liam said nothing, just went back to reading the cases. But trouble was brewing for him, so he decided to visit Emil again, and the other family, the Antoninos. First he visited Emil at his workplace, a diner named V's. "Oh, you again? What'd you want from me? Can't you read the sign?" Emil asked. Liam looked at the sign, reading colored only. It was still the mid-60s, and the Civil Rights Act was still months away. "I don't care for signs. They're just words. Also, those folks wouldn't want a drunk like me," Liam smirked. "You, sir, a strange fella. Surprised you don't go for the whites-only places," Emil said. "Well, I've never done so. Those people treat me differently because I have a different bloody voice," Liam added. "Oh, damn, son. Well, what can I get you?" Emil asked. "Just a cheeseburger, fries, a Coke, and a chocolate milkshake," he answered. "All right, coming right up," Emil replied. As the food was cooking, Liam took out his notebook and pen. "Right, I have some questions. First one, what was the last number on the license plate that supposedly took your daughter? From what I could gather, the number seems to be a 5, 6, or 9. I need to know what the number is," Liam asked. "I don't know nothing. From what I could tell, some man who saw the whole damn encounter saw the plate and said the number was a 5. Well, some other who saw it and said it was a 6. And there's my brother. He said it was a 9. As for what I think, well, it's a 5 from what I've made out, Emil answered. He placed the food in front of Liam, who began eating. So, don't eat a lot of fast food? Emil asked. Not really. I usually eat my sandwich around this time, but, well, Judy brought me here, Liam answered. He looked around to see other people coming in. Hey, Emil, why you let white folk in here? The man asked. I'm here on official business. Now, do any of you know anything about the disappearance of his daughter? Liam replied. The place went silent. No one made a sound. The people all looked at each other, and then one man stepped forward. I do remember one thing. I was doing some yard work with my parents. I remember when I was getting some water from the hose in the back of the house. There's a road there and one in the front. When I was done, I heard an ear-piercing scream. After I dropped my bucket, I saw the truck, which is where you got the description from. Managed to get a single photo before the truck sped off. After that, I called the police. But they said it was nothing, the man said. Well, that can do some good, Liam added. He left after finishing his food, and soon went to the Antonino's house. After knocking on the door, a short Italian man came to open. What can I do for you? He asked. Is Anthony home? Liam asked. Yeah, he's here. Boy, get your ass the fuck down here this fucking instant. You're gonna see Mars, the man yelled. See, Papa, another man's voice said. Then he stumbled down the stairs. Ah, great, another drunk. Go to hell, piece of shit, Anthony sighed. Look, I'm only going to ask you some questions. Now, where were you when your sister was taken from this place? Liam asked. Dunno. Why don't you ask my fist? Anthony asked. Hey, the man, his father, spat. Fine, I'll answer. I was out with some friends just chilling at Vito's. All of a sudden, we got ourselves some tough guy who wanted to take us for some fun. We says no, but he insists we do. About several minutes of this shit, he snaps and drives off and takes off towards my place. Well, I thinks he don't want to go to my place, but big fucking mistake. As soon as I get back, the sister's gone. Truck looked the same as the one I saw at Vito's, as Paps described it, Anthony explained. Well, did either of you see the license plate? What was the last number of it? Well, what I saw was a 6, the father, Will, answered. Well, I saw a 9, Anthony said. Well, thank you for your time. If you have anything more, please contact me. As Liam left, Anthony flipped up his middle finger. Irish trash, he shouted. Liam just shrugged his head. He drove home to continue his work in his office. As he turned left, right, then left again onto the street near his, he noticed something from the corner of his eye. He pulled over and saw the truck, battered and lying in a ditch behind several trees. Damn, how the hell did I miss this? He asked himself. He called Emil to tell him of the truck's location. I'll be there in the morning. It's late. Maybe this can lead to my daughter. God, I hope so, he said. The next morning, Emil arrived and saw the truck. My God. Will and Anthony were then called. Anthony was soon flooded with memories of that night. The man from the restaurant was called and was brought before the truck. Both remembered it and correctly identified it as the truck that they'd seen. The only question is, who owns it or who stole it? Emil asked. Well, I'll work on that now, Liam replied. Thank you. I owe my life to you, pal, Emil added. Well, I can ask for you if I need you, like Batman and Robin, Liam said. He drove off to find out who owned that particular green truck. It would take him a great many weeks to find the one. Emil went back home and decided to explore the woods behind his house. He took his shotgun and ventured with his dog into the forest. As Emil readied his gun, his dog barked loudly, so Emil left his gun in a spot. He ran over to the canine's howling, tripping over twigs, fallen branches, and other things on the Texas forest floor. What the hell are you barking at, Harvey? What's... Oh, Jesus Christ, Emil shouted.
What is it, hon?
His wife Susan asked.
Oh, come see this.
Well, Susan wept and screamed as soon as she saw the bodies in the trees. The police took the decomposed, blood-soaked remains to the autopsy room. There, they were identified as Emil's long-lost daughter Francine and Will's daughter Viviana. Both bodies show sign of cuts and blunt force trauma. It was concluded that they'd been killed by blunt force. Their bodies appeared to have been placed there, so the location of the actual killings was unknown. Liam was called in, and he immediately knew that this was the work of a madman. Liam soon arrived at Emil's house. He barged past him with a force like that of a train hitting an elephant. He quickly arrived in the woods and saw the tree where the two bodies had been found. There were still bloodstains on the bark of the tree. Liam put his fingers on the bark, the blood seeping onto them.
Oh, Jesus, he said. Whoever did this is a frickin' monster. I want his damn head on a spike,
Emil shouted. Well, the police who were there looked at Liam, wanting him to think of something quick.
Hey, analyze this.
I'm going to a car dealership, one that sells these, he said. He looked inside the truck for anything useful.
Oh, there was next to nothing in it,
except for some receipts, a knife, a .22 caliber handgun, and another paper that had faint words, barely readable, saying Fabio's garage. Oh, that's what he thought he saw in it anyway. Liam drove to Fabio's garage. He exited his blue 1965 Ford Mustang and approached the owner, the aforementioned Fabio. "How can I help you today?" Fabio asked. "Do you perhaps know of someone who bought a green 1963 Chevrolet pickup truck?" he asked. "I'm sorry. Had several people buy the same damn truck. Can you be more specific, eh?" Fabio replied. Liam held up the license plate, which he'd secretly taken from the back since the front was buried in the dirt. Yeah. Believe that was given to Andre Hopkins. Never thought he'd be caught in this shit fest," Fabio added. "Look, I'm sorry for disturbing you. I know this is a lot," Liam said. Then he left to find Andre. Andre lived in a rundown part of the city. Liam approached and knocked on the door. "Please, open up, Andre. I just want to talk," he said, knocking on the door violently. No answer, so Liam knocked again. "Open the goddamn door, damn it," Liam shouted.
"Fuck off,"
a voice shouted back. "Andre, I just want to talk."
"Fourth Amendment, fucker,"
the voice replied. "Oh, Andre, we can do this the easy way or the hard way," Liam shouted. Suddenly a large, overweight young man came to the door. His clothes were slightly tattered and covered in a red liquid.
"What the hell you want?"
he asked. "Andre, I just want to talk. Where were you when Emil Power's daughter and William Antonino's daughter were kidnapped and killed?"
"I was driving around after drinking. Later picked up some folks and brought them to the forest for some bird watching,"
Andre answered. "Who were the people you picked up? What was the forest like?"
Young kids, both girls. Had a fun time. Screamed on the way there. They were too damn happy."
"And, what were their names?" Liam asked.
Some Italian name and black girl. Francine."
"Did you put them in the tree?" Liam asked.
"Only for the bird watching. They wouldn't shut the hell up about going home, so I beat them. Oh, might have killed them."
"Can I come in?"
"Sure."
Liam entered the next to run-down apartment. There were beer bottles, pornographic magazines, and papers everywhere. He listened as Andre described his life. And then, as Andre held up a gun, he pointed it at Liam.
"You know, I just realized your voice sounds funny. You ain't from around here. You're from out of the country. You know what?
Folks like you deserve to go the fuck back to your home country.
And with that, he fired the gun at Liam, but missed. He then began to grab a beer bottle, but was tackled by Liam before he could throw it.
Get your damn filthy hands off of me,
Andre shouted.
Andre Hopkins, you're under arrest for the murders of Viviana Antonino and Francine Powers, along with attempting to assault a police detective.
Liam then pushed the sloppily dressed man into the back of his car in cuffs. He delivered him to the station, where Mr. E spat at him. After several hours of interrogation, Andre was housed in the holding cell, where he'd be transferred to a jail. He was finally brought to trial nearly 2 years later. My father told me all about this trial, but I fell asleep since it was so long and boring. Andre, according to my father, pleaded not guilty by cause of insanity. But the judge and jury weren't having it. He was sentenced to 100 years for Francine's murder and given the death sentence for Viviana's. As he was let out, he shouted at Liam, Will, and Emile, swearing at all of them. For years, Andre sat on death row, awaiting the time to meet his maker. But just 3 hours before he was scheduled to die by the chair, something came in. The federal government had just abolished the death penalty. Andre, along with the other death row inmates across the country, had their sentences commuted to life in prison. Andre, being a dangerous offender, was given no chance of parole for 100 years. Funny, since that meant he would never get out. Nope, Andre would never get to experience the freedoms of other non-death row prisoners, like shopping, seeing family, and all the other stuff. But one night, when my father was eating his dinner sandwich, he received word of something that would haunt him. Emile called him and said the words that made my father drop his food, making it fall harder than Hannibal's elephants did when they fell trying to cross the mountains on their way to Rome.
Andre Hopkins just escaped. Prison officials let him go shopping for his good behavior. He just vanished like a ghost,
Emile said. So he was out. Not by him being released from prison, but because he had escaped. Now he was on the run and was lurking out in the shadows. Liam ran outside and panted, looking around his property in hopes to catch this deranged motherfucker.
He'd worked for weeks, months on end, to find and then get this psychopathic monster behind bars, so that he wouldn't harm another hair on another's soul.
But now, he was out there, possibly looking for him.
Right. You're here. Come on, where are you? He muttered to himself.
When he was angry, no one would dare cross his path. If they did, they'd feel the wrath of God and his army coming down upon them like a heavy rainfall during a monsoon. He huffed and went back into the house and decided then to go back to work. While working on the case of Andre's disappearance, he would hear strange noises from inside the house. Thinking it was probably just his kids or his pets, he tried to shake it off, but what he would hear would nonetheless make him shudder. Something, or rather someone very familiar, was inside the walls, waiting to strike him at the perfect moment. After several years of Andre being free and on the run, Liam continued the hunt for him. It was 1978 now, and Liam started working on some unsolved cases from El Paso and Houston. Around this time, I was only 20 and had moved away, not knowing what my father was doing since I didn't read the local paper or see him too often. But he was always working, even on holidays. Like a kid at a candy store, he could just never stop. Liam was busy filing his cases so he could focus on other things. Despite his frustration, he was not willing to give in. Most of the squad, including Mr. E, had given up and said, well, Andre had probably died, or someone had gotten to him. One day, after hours of working, he went outside to get some sun. He didn't usually get much, and the doctor had recommended he did, so he wouldn't become like Dracula at only 56. He was upset by this, but soon realized that this would eventually lead to more grisly findings. Well, Emil was around and would also step in to help. Now Mr. E, although not entirely for this, eventually let Emil help. He'd had a change of heart since reading the works of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And one night, as Liam walked along his back porch, he smelled something foul, like a dead animal. He went to investigate and track this smell. The odor led him to a patch of bushes. When Liam approached it, he gasped. There lay the body of a young boy, looked to be about age 6 or 7. He had bruises on his left arm, and his right arm was missing. Liam found it in a stream nearby. Emil contacted him to tell him he'd found the remains of another child in the woods, albeit a different tree from where his daughter had been found. Liam called his police friends, and they arrived within the hour. Liam was questioned, and the houses were quickly searched. "Look, we're going to have to go somewhere. Hotel, maybe." "Fine. I just hope it's not for too long," his wife, Mavie, answered. So they packed some things for a hotel and let the police do their work. Liam would go back and help, and he'd soon learn from the locals that more bodies of young women, a man, and more children had been found. Some were near the highway, others in the forest, and others nearer the houses. Only one of the family members of one of the victims came forward to help give a description of the killer, now dubbed the Texas Killer. Liam would get his hands on the sketch and notice some odd details. The way it was drawn, it was similar to that of Andre. Well, was he out there, needing to be caught? He was, before he struck again. "Damn, that dirty son of a bitch," Liam muttered. And so he drove, for hours and hours on end, but not finding a damn trace of Andre. Then, when he finally got home, he heard the noise. Well, the police had done their research in the house and had left. Liam grabbed a knife from the kitchen. He was ready to strike. "Who's there?" he asked. Nothing. Just silence and the darkness in front of him. And then another creak came from inside the house. "Hey, I ain't fucking around. Come on, coward, show yourself." Then, with a loud thump, a man bolted towards Liam, pounding him to the floor before he began to shoot at him. "God, Andre, what the hell are you doing here?" Liam asked. "I might as well get my vengeance on you, Irish donkey, putting me away. You had some balls for that. Well, let me see you go to hell." Mavie had gotten out of the car and shrieked when she saw his face. Andre then bolted towards her, knocking her down and violently assaulting her. Liam tried to fight back, but was knocked to near unconsciousness. Andre had soon dragged Mavie into the bedroom and had begun to rip her clothes off. He then tried to force himself upon her as she cried out violent, hot tears of fear. Liam was next to passing out, and with all his remaining strength, he called Emil and Will and told them to come to the house and also to call the police. Emil did so, and then he arrived at the house with a shotgun, while Will came with a butcher's knife. "Get the fuck away from her, you dirty-ass pig," Emil shouted. Andre ran past Emil, knocking the gun from his hands. He then found one of Liam's pistols and grabbed it. And then he ran. He left the building and made his way to a neighbor's house, where he broke in and grabbed hold of their kid. He came out slowly, with the gun aimed at the kid's head. "Come on, you fuckers. You bring me back to prison. Do it, or this kid meets his maker," Andre shouted. Then Liam limped out, gun in hand. "Don't shoot to kill. Shoot to injure, you hear that? Oh, I want this bastard alive," Liam ordered as the police arrived. "Please, sir, don't," the boy cried. "Look, this doesn't have to be like this, Andre. Let him go," Liam begged. "So you can go back to his perfect family?" "No. Hey, never had that chance. My father was a fucking pig. No job, he drank, he was so abusive. I wanted that old man dead, and I got my wish when he got the chair. Hey, I never have a happy life, so why should others? Look, not all families are perfect. No family's perfect, not even mine, hell. I spent most of my time hunting for you. Barely got to say hello to my children, Liam answered. Yeah, still better than what God gave me. He fucked me over too many times, and now I repay the favor by doing the same to him. See how he likes it. Liam lowered his pistol, placed his hands on his hips. But Andre wasn't having it. He shot the boy in the head. No! Emil shouted. Liam ran towards Andre, who'd by now fled into the woods. He fired, and so did Andre. It wasn't until Andre had either lost his breath or tripped over a branch that he was caught. Well, he heavily resisted, and so had to be subdued. And he eventually was caught and arrested. At the separate trials, he pled not guilty to all of the counts. He eventually was charged with 12 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, 7 of rape, and 2 counts of escaping the law. In the end, he received 9 death sentences, 3 life sentences, 4 20-year sentences, 8 10-year sentences, and 6 5-year sentences. He just smiled when he heard all of this. When it came to the life and death sentences, though, he wailed and wailed. In the end, some of his death sentences were commuted to life, reducing the number of death sentences to only 5. He spent several more years on death row, always denying his guilt. He would file for appeal several times, but would be denied every single one. And then the day came, April of 1997, and my father asked me to come with him. I obliged, being the decent son that I am. Andre's last meal was a cheeseburger, French fries, a Coke, and a chocolate milkshake, just like my father had had when he was at Emil's. Why did you choose to eat that? Liam asked. Simple. 'Cause you did, Andre answered, smiling an evil grin. Why of all people me? Liam asked. Did you not see me? I was there at Emil's when you were questioning him. I was in the window. He had every chance to catch me, but said no to it. So tell me, Irishman, are you really the genius you think you are? 'Cause you'd have noticed me, Andre answered, smiling his evil smile once more. Hey, time to go, Hopkins, the guard said. Andre took his last shower and spoke with the priest. We weren't allowed to hear the words due to confidentiality, and because he told us not to. My father, myself, along with the victims' families, Emil, some of Andre's family, and Will and Anthony all gathered in the watching room. As the curtains were drawn, Andre lay on the gurney, flat and motionless, completely drained of any emotion. Andre Hopkins, you've been tried, convicted, and sentenced to death by the state of Texas for the murders of... He began to list the names of the victims. I couldn't remember most, only some like Taylor Pearl, Kendricks Henderson, and Faith Salvina. Do you have any last words? The chaplain asked. I know what I did was right. God always told me to piss off, so I told him to do the same. Come to think of it, I'm a sinner. I've caused hell for everyone, and I deserve to suffer because of it. I hope I can go in peace, knowing I'm no better than a street rat, Andre said, crying and in conflicting tones. No one could really know if he was sorry at all, or if he was just faking it to get his death sentence commuted so that he'd have a chance to escape and kill more kids. As the injection process began, his eyes rolled back and he lay stone cold, not moving. He was pronounced dead at 7:15 p.m. The warden said this was one of the fastest executions, as they usually take hours. But after that, my father and I hugged. Then we left that godforsaken prison and headed back to civilization. My father went on to live until 2017, to the ripe old age of 96. Emil lived until he was 92 in 2019, and Will made it to 87. He died about a decade or so after Andre had. Anthony, Emil's son Henry, and I live relatively close to one another, and we're all still friends. Since then, I haven't talked about Andre to anyone, though. I prefer to keep that memory locked away for when my kids get older. Maybe it's best if I never tell them. Hands. My haphiphobia experience. Dear Internet, to anybody who may be reading this, I'd like to share a secret. This is a truth about me that I've been reluctant to share with anyone for as long as it's plagued me. This is a truth that I've fought countless times to no avail. I've even simply tried to deny it, though, like a parasite, it would never leave me. For as long as I can remember, I've been haphophobic. Now, you might be wondering, what the hell is that? And to you I'd respond with my deepest envy, as I'm jealous of your blissful ignorance. I'd also explain that haphiphobia is the fear of being touched and of physical contact. Prolonged physical contact makes me nauseous, and hands are my biggest fear. Now, I imagine you'd find that amusing, and if you do, I fully understand. I myself am aware that it's completely irrational, but that obviously isn't enough to chase away a phobia. I doubt writing a blog will be either, but I just felt I should share this with somebody, even if it is with people who may or may not care. I don't know specifically when this started, but from some time in my childhood, I have been terrified of people even coming near me. It started off innocent enough. Whether it was with the kids at the park or at parties held between my mother and her friends, I'd always keep my distance from the kids around me, especially the boys. Now, I don't mean to be rude or prejudiced, but boys would always make me uncomfortable in particular. My parents simply thought it was a sign of maidenship, but I didn't feel like it was. It wasn't that I felt like playing rough was improper, but rather that I was afraid of what might happen if I were to make contact with somebody. Adults mostly found it cute, so they didn't think reinforcing the fact that touch is indeed not lethal was very necessary. Well, from where I stand today, I would say it was clearly very necessary, but obviously you can't change the past. Judging by my predicament today, however, sometimes it feels like even the present is unchangeable. From around the age of 7, I believe, is when this phobia of mine really started to take hold of my life. I was past my days of being a baby or a mere toddler, and I was starting to feel like I could really become whatever I could dream to become. This was just one of the many things I could thank my mother for. It was her that had helped me most along my journey of life, and the only one I could thank for my strong optimism. Despite this, she was still unaware of my fear. I'm afraid it was such a thing that nobody, not even family, could have helped me with, though people did help in making it worse. It was June 27th, 1999, and some of the girls in my class were organizing a sleepover to celebrate the coming of summer, though mostly summer break. Around this time, my fear had weakened its grip on my life, and I was beginning to make a lot of friends. I guess I was a social butterfly all along, without the fear weighing me down, but it wasn't apparent until that grade 1 year. I was good friends with one of the girls who'd organized the event, or rather their parents had, and so I was invited. Naive old me, however, wasn't actually aware what a sleepover was, but I trusted my friend and decided to go anyway. Dressed in our pajamas, Luca and I had been dropped off at Cindy's house for a sleepover on the 29th, and boy, were we excited. What I'd imagined was a night of lying in our beds, staring at the ceiling and sharing stories with each other as we slowly fell asleep. And I had a feeling Luca was more knowledgeable. Well, we were welcomed into the house, being the first to arrive, and we just started off chatting in the living room. As more and more kids started to show up, however, we eventually relocated upstairs, where Cindy had planned a night of games and fun until the morning came. Marching up to her room and taking a step in, everybody was mesmerized by her amazing room, which, in retrospect, was the most girly room in the world. Her bed was especially queen-like, being big enough for all 5 of us to fit comfortably on. Whatever Cindy had planned to do would have to wait, as her massive bed had inspired my friend Luca to sprint onto it, raise her fist and yell, "Pillow fight!" All the girls immediately followed behind her to claim their weapon of murder, though I'd stayed back. Instead, I stood there with my hands shaking as I struggled to fight back an old friend. It seemed that only my fear for the possibility of being touched had lessened, but I was still anxious if it was certain to come. I didn't want to look odd in front of my friends, so I inched up to the bed and sort of sat on the very edge. After a couple of minutes, the 4 had finished tossing their pillows out, and were exhausted from the work. Well, I didn't want to seem like a bad sport, so I told them I'd go downstairs and get some drinks to help them rest, though, as I said it, Luca seemed to get a mischievous glint in her eyes. The girls must have discussed something when I went downstairs, because as I re-entered the room, I heard them snickering. I set the Kool-Aid jammers down on the bedside table and sat beside it. As expected, the girls crawled towards the table, but as they did, they seemed to be eyeing me down. Due to my fear, I immediately went into defense mode upon detecting danger, but I was already too late. I could only remember what proceeded as one of the most terrifying moments of my life. One of the girls, Rebecca, had grabbed me from behind and had me in a lock with my arms useless above my head, while the other 3 pinned me down to the bed. I realized that they were planning to attack me while I was downstairs getting the drinks, probably because I'd sat out the whole game of the pillow fight. All 3 at once dug into my torso, tickling me against my will. Fingers brushed against my ribs and stomach, and I struggled to keep breathing as a wave of panic washed over me. I could hear their giggling as I struggled against the reins holding me down, but I was too weak. My lungs were empty and I felt like screaming, but couldn't, though with every breath I could feel the air escaping me like a deflated tire. Finally, I could no longer take it, and I started to sob, which the girls had thankfully noticed. Lying curled up in a ball, I felt violated and vulnerable, and if I'd had the energy, I would have run. Well, Cindy's parents came rushing upstairs from hearing me crying, and tried their best to comfort me, while they tried to piece together what had happened. Well, I didn't want my friends to get in trouble, since they weren't trying to hurt me, but at the moment I was seething with fear, hate, and anger, and too many other emotions to speak. As I found out later, Cindy was grounded after the sleepover, and even during the party I imagine the mood had been ruined by my pathetic number. Cindy's parents gave me a ride home and were really nice about the whole incident, but the entire ride home I couldn't help but feel like the whole situation was basically all my fault. I realized my friends were simply playing a friendly trick on me, unaware I was going to lash out like that. They would have known about my fear if I'd just told them about it. As we drove in silence, I could feel myself tearing up. Me, I thought, that's what's wrong. If it wasn't for my stupid fear, this entire thing would never have happened. I felt guilty and ashamed of myself, being afraid of something as simple as being touched. It's not like they're going to kill you. I mean, they're your friends. I blamed myself for the incident the following days and didn't speak at all to Cindy or Luca. They would give me an apologetic look whenever we'd accidentally make eye contact, but I tried not to make them return their gaze. Even though Luca had faced me the day after and apologized, my guilt still remained, along with my fear. That night, however, I'd rushed off to bed right after Cindy's parents drove me home, partly because I was tired, but mostly because I didn't want to discuss with my parents what had happened. Cindy's parents were understanding, so they only told my parents that I came back because I wasn't feeling well. I'd brushed my teeth in a hurry and took off for bed, all the while acting like I was coming down with a fever or something, so I could get to bed fast. I lay down on the soft pillow and hoped to put the night behind me as my eyes slowly wavered and closed shut. Also that night, I remember I had a dream, or I guess it was more of a nightmare. God, it wasn't bad enough that I had had a panic attack at my friend's sleepover. I also had to have a nightmare to close off the night. From what I can remember, my dream had begun with me lying on a raft of wood, drifting listlessly across a sea with water as far as the eye could see. I sat up and blinked my eyes, looking at the only thing that stood out in the scene. Me. I seemed to be older, much bigger than a 7-year-old girl. Around me the air was cold, and the wind felt like it was piercing through my shirt. I sat on the raft for what felt like hours, wondering if there was anything I should be doing. The dream seemed to be messing with my common sense, as I was not at all shocked by the fact that I was floating alone in a sea on a small raft. Suddenly, though, the raft was stable and the sea calm. My wooden platform began to inexplicably sink. I at least knew the basics of swimming in real life, but in the dream I seemed to be helpless in the water. I stretched out my arms and legs to float, but I was somehow still sinking. I began to thrash desperately to try and stay afloat, but despite my efforts I was slowly falling below the waves. Suddenly, though, right before my head went under, I was met with a touch at the center of my back. Reflexively, I jumped and gasped, almost taking in the seawater. Slowly, though, the hand fixed its palm on my back, as if trying to keep me from sinking to the bottom of the sea. That's not what I thought at the moment, though, as my heart raced and I tried even harder to try and escape what awaited me below the surface. With the arrival of the first hand, more and more hands started to emerge from the depths, each finding a spot on my body to latch onto. 2 hands grabbed my shoulder, 1 held my head up, 2 supported my waist, a couple situated at my elbows, and 4 more kept my legs up. Though my head was above the water, I was sputtering to breathe. The hands were helping to keep me from drowning, but I writhed and squirmed against their touch, anxious to escape this torture. It was hard to tell in the water, but I had a feeling I was breaking into a cold sweat. My skin tingled where the hands had touched me, but I tried to reassure myself that they were helping me. For a while, the hands kept me in place, making sure I wouldn't fall to the depths of the cruel sea, and I fought to keep myself calm and thinking straight. However, all of a sudden, the hands had switched from supporting me to taking hold of my body. I gasped in surprise, making sure to take a deep breath in anticipation of what was to come. Then with one swift motion, the hands had pulled me underwater and were now pulling me down to the bottom of the ocean. My deep breath of oxygen was useless as my heart was racing past the speed limit and my mind rushed in a million directions. Panic took over me as I wrestled against the hands that secured me well, but my strength was outnumbered. Soon more and more hands began to surround me, grabbing every bit of exposed skin. I could no longer feel my clothes, and the fingers felt my bare skin as I was stretched out and dragged into the depths of the sea. As my lungs neared their end, I shut my eyes, opened my mouth, and let out a scream of pure fear and agony. Suddenly, the water and the hands were gone, and once again I was lying on my bed safely under the covers. I didn't have time to wonder if I'd actually screamed in real life, because I immediately felt around my bed. No hands. Thank God. I was also relieved to have my clothes back. I curled into a ball, buried my face in my hands, and began sobbing like a little kid. I had no idea what the hell was going on, and I really wasn't curious to find out. All I knew was that I just wanted it to leave me alone. Years had passed since then, and I was 12, starting middle school in the fall. Luca and I had remained great friends throughout the years, but despite the incident when we were 7, I'd still not shared with her my source of dread. She'd faced me the day after that night to apologize and ask why I'd freaked out, though I simply told her that it was nothing, that I was just tired and caught off guard. She was a good friend, but I wouldn't dare even tell her the truth. I was nervous starting middle school since our school's population was small going in. The year had begun tough since a lot of my friends had moved away, and we had a lot more work. This was partly due to my recent involvement in soccer, as I was having trouble managing practice with schoolwork. Middle school had been great with Luca's help, though I didn't really have many friends beside her. My soccer career in the junior and senior teams was great, and I felt like a strong part of both teams. However, things went horribly wrong during the state championships game, but it wasn't because of failure. I can't blame my team for anything that happened. We'd expected the game to be tough, but we weren't expecting it to be a downright stall. Through much effort and luck, both teams had eventually made it to a comfortable 2-2, but were struggling to make it any further than that. In the final 3 minutes, however, the opposing team came in for a final and absolute offence to make it through our lines, but our goalie had remained vigilant and shot the ball back behind their lines before they could react. I'd received the ball and ran it all the way to their net before any of them could catch up. With my goal having been a success, the crowd and our team burst into roaring applause knowing we'd won, and I fell to the ground exhausted. I hit my head, which left me pretty dazed on the ground during the celebration. I drained all my stamina rushing the net, and I was breathing hard. Before I got a chance to attempt getting up, however, I was suddenly met with my team crowding around me, but I thought they were simply going to congratulate me. To say I was caught off guard would have been an understatement, as instead of helping me up, they began lifting me off the ground. I was taken by surprise and didn't have the breath to tell them to put me back down, beg them to put me back down. I gasped and tried to pry the hands off of me, but there were simply too many. My teammates reared back and launched me into the air, and, for a terrifying second, I hung there, wishing I could escape, but the hands were my only support. I couldn't afford to escape their grasp. As quickly as it came, my moment of peace was over, and despite my wild flailing, I would inevitably sink back into their grasp. I didn't want it to be like this, I really didn't. My peers, my friends, my teammates were there to support me, but I knew then, and I know now, that I'll never be able to accept their aid. I would never get myself to take their hand. By the time I'd sunk back into the hands from my fall, I was in tears. I couldn't control myself. I tried steadying my breath to speak, but I was quickly thrown back into the air before I could collect my shattered frame of my mind. Over the celebratory cheers and shouts of my team, my sobbing went unheard. As I came down the second time, however, I heard my team be silenced by a voice that I recognized. Luca. She'd finally managed to quiet the crowd and get them to put me down. I had my eyes shut, but I could still hear Luca outside of the crowd. She must not have participated in the crowd's cheer. I don't know how, but she seemed to have known about my fear even though I'd never told her. I assume it was because she didn't accept my lame excuse and had a feeling that something was up the night of the previous incident. Because of the sudden quiet, I pressed my hands against my face to try and make my sobbing unheard. I was friends with pretty much everybody in my team, and they were all very nice, but it certainly wasn't easy having a panic attack in front of them. It wasn't easy having a panic attack at all, much less in front of others. I knew they'd give me some space after what happened, but I still felt like I was in danger. I curled up into a ball to minimize my surface area, and begged my heart to slow down. I hope my trembling wasn't too apparent. Luca sat beside me trying to comfort me, and I was really thankful to her for that. But it still took a while before I finally calmed down. Well, after that lovely incident, I couldn't look my team in the eyes. Luca escorted me to the change room and then helped me get home. Since our houses were close by, we decided to walk home. It was still sunny, bright and hot, so it added to my urge to get home and stay locked up in my room forever. I wasn't in the mood to talk to anybody, but I couldn't just ditch Luca and walk home alone. Unfortunately, halfway home, she decided it was time to face me about what had happened. Whatever Luca had to ask me, I don't think I wanted to hear it, but getting this over with was probably the best idea. "What have you been hiding from me, Megan?" she asked me. "What's telling you going to solve?" I responded. "What are you talking about, Megan?" she exclaimed. "I'm your best friend." Well, she had a point, but still, it was difficult. But I eventually told her about my haphiphobia. Surprisingly, she wasn't very shocked. "I had a feeling," she said, "that you might freak out if the team decided to celebrate by tossing you into the air, but I couldn't stop them in time." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "Are you going to be all right?" she asked. Fortunately, we'd finally reached my house, so I decided to end the conversation. "Yeah, I'll just need some time alone." And with that, we parted ways. Well, to my good fortune, my parents weren't home, which meant less people to bug me about the long day. I grabbed some chocolate milk from the fridge, trudged up the stairs, entered my room, and locked the door. In hindsight, keeping the door open would have let the wind flow and kept my room cool, but I could hardly care less about that. It was barely evening, but I felt drained. Lying on my bed, I could still feel my back tingle from where my team had lifted me up, as if they left a mark on me. I chugged my milk and set the bottle down on the bedside table, turning over to try and take a nap. It wasn't very hard, seeing how tired I was. I closed my eyes and drifted to sleep. Like that night 7 years ago, I had another nightmare. It seemed my mind's way of coping with a bad day was to make it worse. This time around, I found myself on solid ground, at the very least. I was standing barefoot on a cold marble floor with nothing around me as I walked in a straight line along a vast white floor. The sky was clouded with mist, and I could only see so far around me before my vision plunged into the fog. From what I could see, there wasn't anything else besides me in my dream, so out of curiosity I kept walking forward listlessly through what felt like miles of blank white floor. It was just a dream, so I couldn't feel myself getting tired, and the dream had made my mind blank. After a while of walking, it had become second nature to me, and I instead shifted my focus to what was outside the fog, and if there was something I should be doing. I focused my eyes on the fog ahead of me, but no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't tell what was behind the cloudy cover. At this point, I was starting to get a little annoyed with how, no matter how far I walked, there was nothing for me to see or do. Fortunately, or unfortunately, to meet my boredom, the sky around me began to darken. The once white room slowly dimmed more and more, until it matched the brightness of a dimly moonlit night. However, before I could question the sudden occurrence, there came a sound of footsteps not far behind me. A step-by-step recreation of my walk cycle was brought to my attention, and whatever was the source of the sound, it sounded close. I only now felt the presence of this thing, because its walking wasn't synchronized with mine. I tried to look behind me to check what it was that was following me, but I realized my head suddenly wouldn't turn. Try as I might, my head was now caught in a figurative neck brace, and I could only move my eyes. I began walking faster and faster, trying to outrun my doppelganger, but the footsteps were just as fast. The marble floor was slippery, so I couldn't afford to run because the thing might catch me while I was down. Running from it, I knew I would not be at rest unless I saw this thing that was chasing me, though it very well could have made the dream much more frightening. I turned my neck back and forth, trying to turn it in the direction of this creature. Left and right I struggled, though my efforts felt fruitless. After tugging my neck for a bit, however, it started to move more and more. Slowly I fought against the stiffness and managed to turn my head and shoulders to look behind me. Nothing. There was nothing behind me. As I stared at and walked away from this mysterious series of footsteps, I could see that there was nothing there. It was still bright enough for me to be able to see figures, so why couldn't I see this thing? Out of fear I was still walking, but I stared through endless darkness, unable to find what I was looking for. I knew it was there. In my heart I knew it was there, so why couldn't I see it? I could not see its figure change, but I could tell from its footsteps that this thing was now getting bigger. Gentle steps had turned to thumps, and I knew I wouldn't survive whatever it was that was behind me. I looked away and walked at a brisk pace. I thought that, since this thing had gotten bigger, that I'd be able to outwalk it. I was wrong. It still hovered right behind me. I closed my eyes and tried my best not to let this thing catch up to me, but my run would not be without obstacles. At my new point in this vast empty realm, I was met with many more footsteps around me, though these were occupied by physical forms at the very least. I couldn't make out any features besides the fact that they looked human. They were walking slower than me, so I had to pass a few as I walked briskly past them. I tried my best not to touch any of them, and for the moment it was relatively easy. They weren't hard to avoid until they began strafing as they walked, moving in different directions with no indication or hint as to their movement. I started colliding with some of them, flinching every time I did. The darkness only served to amplify my irrational fear, as it was now getting harder and harder to see the people walking around. I could only tell their location from their footsteps. Like my previous nightmare, every touch from somebody was felt through my clothes, if I was even wearing any. It was hard to tell in the dream. The population of this empty field was increasing at a fast rate, and there were more people appearing faster than I could avoid. It was particularly difficult to avoid them without slowing down, so I hoped for the best, hugged myself and pushed through the forming crowd. Well, pushing through the crowd was more difficult than I'd expected, and it wasn't because they wouldn't budge. No, every touch was like an electric shock, and my skin tingled everywhere. It was impossible to escape the bodies surrounding me as their rustling clothes brushed against my skin. The fact that the crowd was pretty much at a standstill made me have to push through a lot more people to keep going, and I could feel my panic building. Combined with the pitch black, the lack of footsteps made it near impossible to sense anybody besides touching them. Since there was nothing to see, due to the darkness, I closed my eyes and tried to block out the feeling of pushing through the crowd. My knees were trembling, but I managed to keep walking. I assured myself that their touch would not harm me, and that escaping the grasp of the thing that was chasing me was more important. Oh, it was close behind me, and was getting closer by the minute. I hoped that it would be slowed by the crowd like I was, and so far that seemed to have been the case. However, it was still gaining in on me fast. This continued until the creature was about a foot from me. I could feel its presence, though it made no sound but the sound of its footsteps trudging through the crowd. Yet, all at once, both the creature and the crowd came to a screeching halt, stopping me from proceeding any further. I tried to push through the compact crowd, but the people around me seemed to now be holding their ground, not letting me pass. I tried going left and right, but the people surrounding me had made a wall around me. The circle of people blocking me started to huddle, coming closer and closer. With one swift motion, all of them made a grab for me, trying to hold me down. The person behind me clamped my mouth shut and held me by the neck. The others grabbed me and held my hands behind my back, pinning me to a wall that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. In the silence, the only things audible were the footsteps of the creature that had been following me this entire time, and the rushing sound of my speeding heart. I couldn't stand people touching my face, and at the time their grasp terrified me more than anything the creature could have done to me. I listened in horror as the steps came closer and closer, and despite my retaliations, I knew I wouldn't be able to stop it. I closed my eyes and made a silent prayer, wishing that it was an hallucination of some sort. The creature stepped close to me and grabbed me by the sides of the head. I opened my eyes to see that it now had a physical form. In the darkness I could barely see its face, but I could tell it was pale, sickeningly pale, but it didn't seem to have an expression. I felt it press down on my skull, and for a second I saw his eyes flash a sickening, pale, irisless white, staring back at me. Its jaw fell open, and it let loose a loud, ear-shattering roar. I woke up in a cold sweat, screaming like the creature in my dreams. My eyes darted around the room, trying to validate that I was indeed back in reality, and thankfully the sun was there to dispel my doubts. It seemed that apparently not much time had passed while I was asleep, even though it definitely felt like hours to me. Instinctively, I checked around the room to see if there was anybody else around but me, but obviously there wasn't anybody else in my room. I breathed a sigh of relief and fell back into my pillow, holding my face where the hand had touched me. Well, the dream was as bad as, if not worse, than my previous nightmare of 7 years ago, but this time I could definitely feel the malice in these spirits. It was no coincidence by which they'd pinned me to a wall to be met by the odd creature. The experience was especially frightening because one of the spirits had touched my face. Due to my aphophobia, places such as my face, which would normally be off-limits, are especially so. Whether it's in my dreams or in real life, I can't stand anybody touching my face or my neck. I always feel like I'll suffocate if something comes even near my face. I guess it's mild claustrophobia, but I didn't want to admit it was. I didn't want another phobia on my hands. Fortunately, my parents weren't home yet, so I had time to recover from my strange nightmare. I didn't want to fall asleep again, so I got up and decided to pace around the house. That incident was at the end of grade 8, when middle school would end pretty soon and high school was around the corner. Once again, I would lose most of my friends, but this time our school was fortunately one of the bigger feeder schools. Despite this, on my first day of school, I felt like a complete stranger. I should have felt right at home, but it felt like the people in my class had changed. Most of the people in my classes were familiar, and yet I still felt like a nobody. Besides Luca, now I didn't really feel like I had any close friends. I was never quite bullied either, but I guess there's a first for everything. This incident had started off in science class on third period. It was a long day, and it wasn't even over yet. It was getting to be the end of the year, but nobody seemed too excited. This was the first year we'd had to take an exam in our lives, so we were pretty bummed out. We were taking attendance, and our teacher, Mr. Anderson, noticed that one of the kids in our class, Johnny, wasn't present. I'd seen him in the halls that day, so I raised my hand to tell the teacher that he must just be late. Well, unbeknownst to me, Johnny wasn't just late, but was instead planning to show up late for class with the excuse that he'd just got to school. About more than halfway through, he walked into class with a late slip, claiming that he'd woken up late and had rushed to school. Unfortunately for him, Mr. Anderson didn't buy it because of my information, so Johnny was given detention and told to go sit down. After class was over, it was time for lunch. Lunch was always the most crowded, and the cafeteria was always filled to the brim with hungry teenagers. During the first few minutes, the hallways would be overflowing with traffic, which made it especially difficult to not bump into everybody on your way to your locker. Between classes, I'd always make sure to be the first one out to avoid the hallway confrontation, and for lunch my locker was, fortunately, very close to my class, and I'd rush there and proceed to take shelter in the bathroom to wait out the traffic. Today, however, it seemed as though Johnny and his buddies were not too pleased with my little slip-up, and knew I'd have to lose them before I got to my locker. As soon as the bell rang, they were right behind me leaving the class, so I knew I wouldn't be able to walk straight to my locker. I decided I had to make some detours to lose them. When we left, the hallways were only beginning to be filled, so I had time to put some distance between us. Well, this went well until I got past my locker and turned the corner. Well, there was more and more people filing into the halls, and it seemed like my best option would be to try and lose my chasers in the crowd. My plan was simple, and I was short enough in an elaborately designed school to pull it off, but I couldn't help feel a rush of fear. I realized it was my haphophobia acting up, but I wasn't up for welcoming it. I knew, though, that I couldn't afford to get caught, so I took a deep breath and pushed briskly through the crowd. At first, it was relatively easy not bumping into anybody, especially because I had practice doing so. People would walk in a straight line following the hallway, and there weren't too many of them. Soon, though, there were a lot of people in the halls, a lot more than I was expecting. I'd usually have been in the bathroom waiting out the traffic by then. My heartbeat started to pick up. Once again, I was at a loss for one possible reason as to how a crowded hallway of students could harm me, but my brain would not listen. Every touch was like an electric shock, and there was nothing I could have done about it. With these continuing incidents, I further doubted my ability to overcome my crippling phobia. I hugged my binder close to my heart, hoping it would provide some relief from being in the crowd, some kind of protection. It felt hopeless and futile in the long run, but I kept walking. My mixed fears of my pursuers and the crowd helped with my escape quite a bit. I walked and walked and walked around the school, taking twists and turns to lose my chasers, but they kept on following me. I couldn't believe it hadn't occurred to me that I could have simply waited in the girls' washroom to get them to forfeit chasing me. Instead, I just kept walking through the crowd, taking unexpected turns, hoping I'd lose them. Eventually, though, the crowd had thinned, and I was left very much in plain sight to my followers. The population density was now so low that there was next to nobody in the hallway that they had me cornered in. It was just them and me, and that was not good. "Oh, look who we have here," Johnny spoke. "Little Miss Big Mouth." I knew nothing I could have said would have made the situation better, so I kept quiet. "Wasn't very nice of you what you did today." He continued his monologue. "It's not nice to tell on others." Johnny looked nothing special, but I knew as well as anybody how hard this guy could hit. Whether he'd hit a girl or not, we were yet to find out, but I wasn't too excited to know. "Go ahead, say something," he urged me, yet I still remained quiet. "Come on, try to come up with an excuse, anything." Despite his constant pushing, I remained silent, trying to evaluate the situation to see if I could get myself out of it. Unfortunately, we were in the least populated hallway in the school, and I doubted that anyone would show up any time soon. I finally decided to speak. "What do you want?" I was genuinely asking him what he wanted from me, but I guess he took it the wrong way, because now he looked even madder than before. "What do I want?" he asked me rhetorically. "What I want is to be able to take a couple of leaves from class without being ratted out." Well, it probably wasn't the best idea, but I decided to ask him. "Why were you skipping school then?" Even as I said it, I knew I should have taken it back. It wasn't until that moment that I realized how mad I was myself, and how evident it was in how I'd said it. Well, Johnny expected to be able to miss classes and dodge all responsibility without any consequences. He had no worries about life, yet he was still too cocky and spoiled to make it through school. However, my boiling anger was quickly nullified when Johnny walked closer, putting me back against the wall. His sly grin had turned into a sneer, staring back at me. "Why?" he asked me, grabbing me by the collars on my shirt. "Because I felt like it." Immediately my heart sped up a couple of notches in an instant. I clenched my fists and took a deep breath, knowing I couldn't let Johnny see how terrified I was. I was probably trembling, but there was no way he could have noticed it from the look in his eyes. "It's none of your business what I do or don't do," he stated. "Understand?" At this point I realized he was bluffing and wouldn't actually hit me. Under normal circumstances, I would have been able to talk back to him knowing this. But this time was different. This time my haphophobia was involved. Against my will, I nodded. "Good," he said, looking a little calmed down. As he let me go, I found a seat on the floor, trying to stop my knees from giving out. He looked over at one of his buddies and said, "Hey, Jones, you got my math textbook?" Fortunately for him, Jones seemed to indeed possess his textbook. Johnny took it from his hand and dropped it on the floor beside me. "You'll be doing everything I've missed so far," he said to me. "Which is pretty much everything." Apparently out of things to say to me, he simply turned around and walked away with his buddies, looking more relieved than ever. I picked my sorry behind off the floor, took his textbook, and set off towards my locker to get my lunch. These things happened today, and I'm sitting here on my bed in the dead of night typing out this blog post. I don't know how long I've been doing this. It could very well have been hours since I began, but now the clock is telling me it's officially the next day. My reasons for not going to bed already is not because of the procrastination, nor does it have roots in the events that conspired today. I am, rather, afraid of what might happen if I were to fall asleep. I've taken notice of the fact that, in all previous incidents concerning my haphophobia, the next night I would always have a dream that would foreshadow the next incident. The night of the incident when I was 7 had me sinking in a sea, only to be kept supported by a wave of hands. A very similar event had occurred 7 years later when I was hefted up by my teammates and tossed up in celebration, resembling my dream through hands that kept me from falling, hands that would support and yet terrify me. That night I'd had another dream resembling my encounter today with Johnny, supporting that same feeling of helplessness and inability to escape what was chasing me. Well, after all that's happened today, I can't get myself to go to sleep. What if I have another nightmare like that? I know the previous nightmares could have very well been coincidences, but I simply can't get myself to believe they were. I don't know what to do, but I guess I'll have to go to sleep eventually. I might as well face my fate. And so once again, we reach the end of tonight's podcast. My thanks as always to the authors of those wonderful stories, and to you for taking the time to listen. Now, I'd ask one small favor of you. Wherever you get your podcast from, please write a few nice words and leave a 5-star review, as it really helps the podcast. That's it for this week, but I'll be back again same time, same place, and I do so hope you'll join me once more. Until next time, sweet dreams and bye-bye.